Wow, January is a long month. It's just like that chart, that pie chart they show on the internet where the year is divided up into months and January takes up nearly the whole slice of nearly the whole pie. Holy fuck, it's so weird. It's like time dilation or something. This is a show about jewelry, why we wear it, why it matters, how it's made, and what it means. I'm Alex D, and I turn cannabis into gold. I make mind-blowing jewelry in gold, silver, and platinum from cannabis plants here in Canada for stage, screen, for people who want to rock crazy jewelry. I'm the Cannabis Goldsmith. So I emailed my friend, the master goldsmith out in Toronto, like at 9 last night, telling him how I fixed the vacuum pump. Like he's probably sitting at home with his family, like enjoying dinner. And he gets this text from me. It's like, I fixed the vacuum pump. Fuck, it's amazing. Like I was so excited. I got this vacuum pump. I got this vacuum pump from a fellow jeweler in the area here of Fiona McIntyre of Merrickville, Ontario. Now, if you're around Ottawa, it's worth the drive to go to Merrickville and see Fiona's shop because she's a jeweler and she makes amazing products, and she also teaches jewelry making in her area. So drop in. And also, Merrickville is an amazing little town. It's like something you would see in the movies. Nobody goes to movies anymore, like I said last week. But if you can imagine these Christmas movies with the quaint little town and the beautiful little shops along the main road, this is Merrickville. So if you're in Ontario and it's near Ottawa, between Ottawa and the 401 highway, go to Merrickville. Yeah, and trust me. And there's a nice little lunch restaurant there too, the Yellow Canoe, which is really friendly and fun. And it's like something you would see in Toronto or New York or whatever, but in Merrickville. And they do stuff like sandwiches and like, coffee and tea and stuff. It's quite nice. So go there. So that's it. That's my Ontario travel brochure of the episode. Yeah, but this vacuum pump. Now you're saying, what the hell is a vacuum pump and why is Alex D talking about vacuum pumps? Well, how do jewelers use vacuum pumps? Let me explain what a vacuum pump is. The best way to do that is to compare it to a vacuum, like a household vacuum that you might be familiar with, where you're vacuuming your carpet or you have somebody vacuuming your carpet or whatever, and that's a vacuum. But the amount of suction that produces that vacuum motor is not a lot, really. I mean, it's not going to suck all the air out of the room or anything, right? And you can actually put your hand on top of the suction hose, and it's not going to tear the flush right off your hand, right? It's you can actually block the flow of the suction with your hand. So it's not a really powerful vacuum. Now, a vacuum pump is different. A vacuum pump is a huge motor attached to this like pump thing that sucks air, like really sucks air. It creates a vacuum. It creates an area of low air pressure in space. So what it will do is suck all the air out of an enclosed space. And jewelers use what are called bell jars, or these big clear plastic, acrylic, or it used to be glass, but now they're acrylic, thick jar that sits on a piece of rubber. And all the air is sucked out of that, creating a vacuum inside. And because it's clear, you can see what's being sucked. Okay? You following so far? So the intensity of the vacuum is what's important here. It's pulling all the oxygen. It's pulling everything it can out of that bell jar, creating extreme low pressure inside the bell jar. Now, that's important. Now, if you're not all into vacuum pumps and jewelry manufacturing, then you can just put this aside in your brain. So when you're at the dinner table and the conversation has died down for a second and nobody's talking, you can chip in with, you know how they get gold into rings? And then people will look at you expectantly, waiting for the answer. Then you can say, vacuum pumps. They use vacuum pumps, right? And then you can explain how the vacuum pump creates an area of low pressure, which sucks the gold into the mold. And then it cools and solidifies. And that's how they get gold into rings and other jewelry pieces. That's not the only way, mind you. And that's not the way we used to do it. But that's one way a vacuum is used in jewelry making. As I explained earlier, jewelry making uses a thing called lost wax casting, where you create a master model in wax or resins like we use. We use special resins for this here at Tribe. And we create a master ring model, and then you coat that with plaster. You pour plaster all around it, and in a sleeve, in a stainless steel sleeve, and then that hardens, and then you melt out the wax or the resin inside, and it leaves a hole inside the plaster, the dried plaster. Now that's where the gold or the silver is going to flow into that little cavity. Now, how do you get the gold or the silver or the platinum into that little cavity? Now, there are two ways to do it, or actually there are three ways to do it. You can pour it in by hand and hope for the best, and it might cool before it gets to the bottom of the cavity and ruin your design. You'd only get half of it. You wouldn't get the full thing. So you need the metal to go all the way to the bottom, all the way to completely fill that void in the plaster. Now, we use centrifugal force. We use, like, if you get a string and you put a weight at the end and you swing it around your head and you can feel the weight pulling on the string, that's centrifugal force. That's the roller coaster when you're going around the loop in the roller coaster kind of thing, right? It's pushing you out. So we use that force to force gold and silver into the mold cavity. That's old school. That's the old school method of casting precious metal jewelry, and that's what we do. But these days, they use vacuum pumps. And they'll get that same flask, and instead of swinging it around in a circle to create gravity that forces the silver or the gold into the full cavity of the mold, what happens is they attach a vacuum to one side and it sucks the metal into the mold. So that's one use of a vacuum pump. It can suck metal into a cavity in a mold, hot metal, right? Melted, molten gold or whatever. So that's one way. Now, we're not going to use it. I'm not going to use it that way. I'm going to use it a different way. I'm going to use it to take air out of my silicone molds. Like, when I design my jewelry, I do make a lot of little silicone molds. And what it is you mix this silicone stuff. There's different varieties of it in jewelry making, but we essentially, what you do is you mix two parts of it, and from the moment it's mixed, it begins to cure. So you set up your little object in a flask. What we call a flask is just a container, right? You set your little ring in there, and then you pour all this silicone around the outside of it, and it begins to cure. But there are bubbles inside the silicone when you mix it. When you mix, it has to be mixed well. And when you're stirring it, you're introducing air and bubbles into it. And that destroys the quality of a mold. If the bubbles are locked in when the silicone cures, they become part of your design. And you don't want that at all. You just don't want that, right? Now, you still with me about vacuums and jewelry making? Stick around. It's all the good parts coming up, I'm telling you. So anyway, you're thinking, how do I get the air bubbles out of this liquid silicone? Because remember, it's curing. You've got, 10 depending on the material, the silicone product you're using, I mean, you got anywhere from like half an hour to 4 hours before it cures. And the bubbles can cure in this and destroy your mold. The other thing to worry about with this silicone, these silicone molding products, like, okay, maybe I'm going a bit too fast here. Why would a jeweler even use silicone molding products? Okay, here's how I use them. I spend a whole day designing a ring, a master model of a ring in wax or resin. Now, if I send this to Ed in Toronto to cast in silver, it's destroyed in the process, right, of casting. It's melted, and it leaves that void in the plaster. So it's destroyed. So once the gold or the silver ring is made from that master model, there can't be another, right? And I can't use the design again to modify it or do things with it, which is important for me. I want to be able to incorporate that design into other designs. I want to keep rolling the designs forward. And this is what we're doing. So how do you do that? Well, you make a mold. You make a mold of your design, a temporary mold. And that's what I do. So I'm using these silicones. I make a beautiful ring. For example, I spend all day making a ring, and I'm happy with it. So I want to cast it in gold, but before I do that, I'm going to make a duplicate of it. So for my files, for myself, this is not an exact duplicate, but it's as close as I can get to that. And what I can do with that is, if, for example, if I make a mistake and destroy the master model, I have a backup I can use to recast another one from my own temporary mold and begin work on it again, or continue work on it. Or I can modify the design. So I create my master model, then I create a copy from that, and I can work on the copy or the master model, and before sending it off to be cast and destroyed in the casting. So that's how it works. So that's how I use this silicone molding stuff. Now, with silicone, these days there are silicone molding materials that, and they claim not to need vacuum degassing. So that's what the vacuum does. It takes the gases out of the silicone molding material as it's curing. It's called degassing. So how it works is you get your flask, you put your ring model inside, you pour the goop, you mix the two parts of silicone together, you pour that in the flask. Then you put that in your bell jar and you suck all the air out. And what happens is the air inside the silicone that you stirred in when you were mixing the two parts together, what happens is the bubbles start coming to the surface inside your flask, inside the bell jar. And it begins to foam up like beer. The vacuum pulls all the air out of the silicone molding material. Now, visibly, you can't even see, before the vacuum is turned on, it looks fine. It looks like there are no bubbles in it. But as soon as you turn the vacuum on, you can see all the air being sucked out of that silicone molding material. Now, what that does is it cleans up the whole mold. So your model that is being molded in the silicone comes out exactly the way it's supposed to, without bubbles or defects or anything like that when the silicone cures. So that's how vacuum is used in silicone molding. And in casting, now there are probably other ways to use vacuums, but for jewelers, those are the two main ways to use vacuum pumps: degassing or in casting. And we're not using them in casting. We're just going to use it in the degassing to improve our mold making. Because how I work is I take, for example, a cannabis leaf, and I make a ring out of it, a gold ring, and then I'll mold that, and then I'll start working on iterations of that and altering it and changing it and adding to it. And so all these interim molds in the process allow me to step back if I make a big mistake. Hey, I haven't in a while. I shouldn't say that because I'll probably make a huge mistake now. But I haven't It's like with graphic design. If you're using Illustrator, you have undo levels, right? Or Photoshop or Corel or whatever. You have undo levels. So if you're creating a design and you fuck it up, you can go back and go back to the previous couple of designs before. And that's how I use my temporary silicone molds. But the problem with this silicone is it's so expensive. The more expensive ones, the platinum silicones, they're designed so that they trap less air in the material, in the liquid, which is great if you don't have a vacuum pump. But now I do. I'm not going to worry so much about this. So I can use less expensive silicones that have perhaps longer drying cycles or curing cycles. As long as I suck all the air out, I'll be fine. But these platinum silicones are so expensive. They're ridiculously expensive. And they're not stable. They go bad. They have a short shelf life. You have to keep temperature in your studio in a certain range in order to keep them from going bad. I've bought them. They're like expensive. They're very, very expensive, platinum silicones. And if in Canada in the winter, if you're ordering them, like if a courier leaves them sitting in his van in the winter, they'll freeze and be ruined. So by the time you get them, they might look fine, but as soon as you're trying to mold something, they won't cure, or they'll be chunky or like disgusting, and then you've already paid for it. So you're fucked, basically. The older silicones, the silicone, the rubbers, right? The old pink classic jewelry silicones, they are less expensive, but you need a vacuum to suck the bubbles out. So now that I've got that, this is why I texted my friend Ed at like 9 p.m. last night saying, Ed, I fucking fixed the thing. Like, it's sucking great. Like, geez, I was so excited. So what I did was I got this pump from Fiona for free, and I spent a couple of days looking it over, and then I started taking the back off. It had like a cord coming out of it that was cut and like frayed in two places. Like, had I just plugged it in, it would have caught fire. I'm pretty sure. So I pulled that out, and then slowly I looked online for specs on it, and it's old. I couldn't find any directions, but I just opened it up, took off the old power cord, and then I put in a new power cord and switch, and flushed out the oil container part, and then added new vacuum oil, and it works great. It's fucking amazing. So what's going to happen now, in addition, it's a new addition to our studio here, and it will help us make master models way better. So the detail is going to go up exponentially in the products when it's needed. And I'm just so excited about that. So now that I've bored you all with why jewelers use vacuums in jewelry making and how we use them, I want to talk about something else. It's our 1 year anniversary. I can't believe it. I've been doing this podcast for a year. I haven't thought about, I've thought about the listeners. I tend to think about one listener. If I'm recording this, I'm thinking like I'm talking to one person in my mind, and that's what I do when I record this. I have no idea how many people are subscribed to the show. I haven't even looked, to be honest. I'm just recording it. I thought I'd do a year, and then we'll like see what happens after that. But I'm enjoying doing this, and it's also, I think people are subscribing slowly, and I haven't really promoted the show or done anything like that. And I've known that I have, beside it being on podcasts, this is a podcast, an audio show. I've always known I have to put it on YouTube, because Google, in their wisdom, has decided not to support Google Podcasts anymore, their podcast app. Now, this is the thing with Google. They launch something with big fanfare. They get everyone attached to it, and then they just pull the rug right out from under. I was like, you know what? Jesus. Anyway, I've done a year, and I'm thinking I've got to get my shows up on YouTube. What Google is doing is they're trying to take all the Google podcast stuff and put it on YouTube. So I have 52 shows that I have to put on YouTube. And what that means is I have to record video for each show. Now, I'm not going to, it's daunting. So my tip for you is if you're going to start a podcast, from the outset, to create versions of it for YouTube from the moment you start, and in addition to your audio version, and that way you can upload them simultaneously. Now I have to go back and recreate video of all these shows and upload them to YouTube. So I've got some of them done so far, but there's like 52 shows. So I'm going to do it in chunks and then upload them. And then when I catch up, I'll be recording this show like today, and they'll go up on all the platforms simultaneously, every Wednesday. That's what I hope to do with this. But the YouTube thing, I'm not going to be recording myself like a lot of the podcasts are. They have a camera looking at the guy speaking into a microphone. I'm not going to be doing that. In fact, I can't do that for the existing 52 shows because I'd have to re-record me doing them, and it's just too much. So what I'm going to do is run the audio track and put video on top and make YouTube videos like that. So you have to create video, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I might have some pictures of our products. Like if I talk about a certain product in the podcast, we'll have photos, videos of the product in the YouTube video. But for the bulk of it, I'm just going to run pictures of weed in the background. Last season, I recorded a lot of video of plants just growing, blowing in the wind or whatever, or, in the sun setting with plants. I've got like hours and hours of that. So what I'll do is I'll just load that up above our audio content. So the audio track will be the video for the audio track of the podcast. So I'm doing all that stuff. It's quite a task to catch up, but I'll get there. I guess this year it'll be all wrapped up. And eventually when I catch up, what I'm going to do is just like, as I say, just upload everything every Wednesday to all platforms. And that way all the bases are covered. So that's it. If you're a podcaster and you're just about to launch your new podcast, remember, don't get behind with uploading to a platform. Now, I did it because I didn't even know if I wanted to put my content up on Google, on YouTube, But I guess I'm going to do it. Why not? We'll see how that goes. But anyway, this show is not about getting you to buy stuff or it's, if you've listened to any of these episodes, you know that. And it's about the artist process. It's about my process of creating these amazing products out of cannabis plants in precious metal for people all around the world. We're like a skunk works for skunk here. And I've set up a studio where I work in all kinds of weird materials, like to make master models that are cast in precious metal in Toronto and shipped to clients all around the world. It's just amazing, really. So if you're there listening to this, you can picture me in this workshop surrounded by vacuum pumps and like in bell jars and plastic sheets and like aluminum strips. It's just like it's a smorgasbord of materials in this shop, and I tinker with them and make them work them into shapes and apply cannabis to them to create these amazing products. So yeah, I'm just fucking hyped. This year is going to be just great, except for the uploading stuff to YouTube. Well, that's the task, I guess. That's what we have to do. But I've also been practicing recording myself on video. Like, I'm quite comfortable recording audio now, like recording the show. I can record the show the morning of, as I'm doing now, and I can do it, usually without too much post editing afterwards, to make it sound okay. But video is something else. Recording, I hate getting myself photographed. I don't like getting photographs taken of myself. And then video, I haven't had a lot of video taken of myself. So it's like, it's a new experience. So I've been working on practicing, just like this podcast. If you're going to record a podcast, your first ones will suck, just like these. The first early ones in the first year sucked as I learned how to do it, but I'm getting better at it. And I hope you can tell, but I feel like I'm getting better at it. But the video, I have to go through this again with video. So I have to learn how to record myself on video and come across on video. Now, I don't want to come across in any other way than I am. Like, I don't want to pretend to be anything. I just want to record myself as I am, primarily to communicate the knowledge in the podcast to the listener. So as long as I'm understood and it's clear, that's what I want to do. That's the main point. But I don't want it to be boring also. So anyway, I'm recording little segments of myself and then watching it after. And it's so fucking weird, I got to tell you. But I have to do it because eventually when I catch up to getting all the podcasts on YouTube, I'll be recording them straight to video. And I know that's going to come eventually. So there'll be videos and not so much audio shows. Although I'll be able to strip the audio out and then port that over to podcast apps. So anyway, recording myself on video. Fuck, it's so weird. How to do it. A full-length body, close-up, head and shoulders, just like the mouth talking. Like, I don't want it to be about me. It's about the products, But you need a person there you need a person in the image to give scale to the objects you're working on. A lot of times I'm photographing these products we're making, and nobody can tell how big they are. They're massive, by the way. Nobody can tell how big they are because there's nothing human in the image to compare the size to. So this would, I think, help when I'm working on pieces or designing pieces in wax or resin or talking about them. It might help to show the size of the pieces and the amount of work that goes into creating each one for our customers around the world. So that's it. I'm practicing, practice makes perfect. It does. It really does. And it took my whole life to learn that. But if you keep doing something long enough, you'll get better at it. And eventually you don't have to think about doing it. Like riding a bicycle, I suppose. That's all I got to say today on the Cannabis Goldsmith. I'm going to change the image tile since we're in a second year now, I'm going to change the image tile that represents the show. I'm making it a little bit easier to read, so that'll be different going forward from now on. And slowly a little tinkering with some changes to the podcast, and we'll see. If you know of an artist who needs to hear another artist talk about their process, they might not have any need for a vacuum pump, but it often helps other artists hear other artists. I know it helps me hear other artists, what they're up to and how their process is and what they're making and how they do it. I find it incredibly interesting. So I hope if you're an artist and you're working by yourself, as many of us artists do, we're solitary. We're tucked in. We're working on our stuff, and it can get lonely sometimes. I know. So subscribe to this podcast and just listen. And you don't have to contribute or anything. You just listen. And hopefully it'll give you a little bit of a sense of community as you make your pieces and as you turn your visions into reality. All right, next week it's the Grammys. I'm wondering, should I record a video show about the Grammys with pieces so we can display what the jewelry pieces are the people wore at the Grammys? I'm wondering, should I do that? There might be licensing issues. I'm going to have to check. And we'll see how it works. Anyway, the Grammys, look for the jewelry. It's not about the music. It's about the jewelry that they're wearing. That's what I'm saying. The Cannabis Goldsmith is produced by Tribe Communications, Inc. in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. You can see what we do at tribe.ca. Send us an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Cannabis Goldsmith.